to these stories just now. There is Michael Gove being attacked on the front of the Observer by the Liberal Democrats. There he is being attacked on the front page of the the Independent on Sunday by the Liberal Democrats. There's the Sunday Telegraph leading with that story about NHS care and the Quality Health Commission. And they've also got a story about immigrant crime. Sunday Times, story about corrupt detectives. But again, Lib Dems savage Gove over sacked schools boss. A lot of coverage of England's defeat in Paris as well, in rugby. Great game, that one. Mail on Sunday, deadly risk of pill used by 1 million women. And they've been pursuing this Tory MP who allegedly dressed up as a Nazi. And finally, Scotland on Sunday, a story about problems in the Scottish Health Service, and inside that newspaper, a story about a row in Scotland over gay marriage. It's not just Westminster, it happens in Holyrood too, and a Scottish rugby player waiting for his moment later on this afternoon. Thank you to both Benedict and Michael for joining us. We're going to start, I think, with the Gove story, which dominates.
And so we should. And so we should. He's coming on your programme in a minute. Well, who did what, eh? A week or so ago, Sir Michael Wilshaw, who is the government-appointed ex-headmaster running Ofsted, the school inspectorate, complained he was being briefed against by Gove aides, those shadowy people, special advisors. And now, a few days later, Sally Morgan, Tony Blair advisor at Number 10, gets sacked as the chairman. What's going on? Morgan was appointed by the Tories. She was a reformer on schools when she worked for Blair. She's not an old Labour Luddite.
She believes in free schools.
Yeah, she's willing to give it all a go. But Ofsted, as it is meant to be independent, as an independent inspector, has been a bit critical of free schools and use of unqualified teachers, just the sort of thing the Teachers' Union is saying. But remember, it's run by a tough guy ex-headmaster, sort of bloke who believes in school discipline like Mr. Gove, Sir Michael Wilshaw. So what's going on? Did Number 10 sack
there is a suspicion that Number 10 moved in.
That's right, Lady Morgan. And then she hits back in these papers, and David Laws, who's after all Gove's deputy, supports her. Lib Dems are very keen on teachers' votes. Where
we don't think, do we, that Michael Gove is coming on later on and David Laws are exactly bosom buddies anyway, do we? There's a bit of a split in the department.
Yeah, that's right. Laws is, remember, the man who fell off the coalition wagon after a month over his expenses. He's back now. He's a super clever fellow. I'm not going to say which has got more GCSEs, Andrew, but I wouldn't be certain that they're both clever fellows. But, of course, Gove is an ex-journalist. Like us, he believes in headlines. He makes too many waves. It's always a mistake.
He may be getting almost too many headlines.
Yes, far too many. You remember he relaunched World War I only the other day. And the Sunday Times has a good line here. Suspicion that a former Tory donor, private equity chief, Theodore Agnew, never heard of him, is earmarked to replace her. Because Morgan says it's not just about getting rid of Labour people like me, it's about getting rid of all independents at the Charity Commission, schools, everywhere else. Yeah. Chris Smith, the Environment agent, he's under fire for the Somerset levels. He's a Labour man too. Yeah. Interesting.
David Laws is quoted, but we don't have an actual quote of him. I think it's about time that he broke cover and that he actually made
it. That would be going
Come
too
on,
far.
that's your next interview.
Absolutely. Well, Benedict, I want to turn to the meat of some of the Gove announcements, including discipline. And who better to have than a French woman on the sofa to talk about school discipline, because you do it very differently over there.
Yes, in fact, I have to say, having gone through the French system myself, I think that I very much agree with what is here termed as old-fashioned school discipline, but and writing lines. I think the newer trend is about having community service, but this is guidance.
What happens to a poorly behaved pupil in a French school if they're causing trouble and disruption to the class?
You get held back for an hour or two. You get brought back on a Saturday. You get to write lines out 100 times. You have to do more homework. Yes, and I think, don't reinvent the wheel. A little bit of discipline. I think it's like being a parent. Don't threaten something you're not prepared to carry out. So I think that this sounds quite sensible. Also, the point actually is that a lot of teachers don't know anymore. They are terrified either of being hit by some pupils, but more importantly and more frequently, they're actually afraid of litigation. Yep. So they don't actually know what they can or can't do.
There's a loss of authority and the threat of litigation right across society, the threat of litigation. Who's in charge? Actually, listening to you talk, I think David Cameron could borrow Gove's new rules for the Conservative Party because there's a lack of discipline and threat of litigation.
And make the right lines about
yes, absolutely.
the EU referendum?
I will obey the leader. 100 times.
I'm suddenly glad you're not my maths teacher, Michael. I can just see you at the end of the classroom there looking quite scary.
It's the moustache.
It's the
sorry.
moustache. Anything
It's the tone
else?
of voice as well.
Right. What are we going to do next?
What are we going to do next?
Well, there's actually a very worrying story in the Daily Mail about women who are on the pill and fatal blood clots.
I'm tempted to say there's always a very worrying story in the Daily Mail about women.
It's a specialism to frighten them.
There are other papers, like the Express, that do that regularly. One of the pills concerned is called Yasmin. And of course, anybody, I should say, the health warning is that don't take my word for it, don't take the Daily Mail's word for it. If you are, taking one of these pills, then you should go and consult your doctor and talk to him or her about it. But it seems, we know that there have been actually 14 deaths in France from this. And so
How do people die from it?
they get a blood clot and basically die from that. But of course, other people are saying, well, 14 deaths, given the huge amount of women, number of women who take it, it's not that dangerous.
I've read this story to the end. It's a scare story again. I mean, they're right to say if women are prone, if vulnerable to blood clots, it's in their family history, maybe they should go on another pill. This is a third-generation pill. It's much more woman-friendly, what do I know? But if you read it to the end, it's been around the third generation for a long time, and you've got to be careful. But pregnancy is dangerous too. Everything's dangerous. Crossing the road is dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's not take the joy out of it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a scare story, so it's a Sunday special.
Now, right at the beginning of the programme, I mentioned the Labour Party's union reform.
Yes.
There's a lot about that in the papers.
Look at
Great
this
big spread.
magnificent Observer. All you need to know, the gurus, the ideas, the think tanks, the key books, the aides. I've written a lot of these in my time, probably so have you, Andrew.
Yes.
And, if you're named here as an important influence, you're in dead trouble. The lads will get you behind the bike shed, make you write 100 lines next week. What it's about is Miliband, I've got another version of it here, Miliband trying to reform the relationship with the unions, the money and the votes.
A lot of Americans in that, a lot of American books,
Yeah.
a lot of American gurus coming in to help the Labour Party win the
the
election.
Labour Party has always turned to the United States, to the Democratic Party, actually even to Theodore Roosevelt, a reforming Republican of 100 years ago, rather than to Europe. And I think it's the lack of Marxist traditions in the British Labour movement. They don't go to French intellectuals. As you know, there's one behind every tree in Paris. So, yeah, they're
And as everyone scrabbles around to try to make sense of the proposed union changes a day in, they'll be very pleased, I should think, the Labour leadership, that Andrew Rawnsley, in the
I've
Observer,
got
one of
here
their key
somewhere. Where's Rawnsley's piece?
observers,
Rawnsley's fairly
he's saying
optimistic.
he's
He's saying he's
about it.
finishing what John Smith and Neil Kinnock started. I must say, I thought he was too optimistic. There are several big ifs in this. Some of the papers say that if you get rid of the unions' big checkbooks and you rely on £3 a head for union members opting in to pay this money to the Labour Party, and they get some voting rights on the leader, £3 a year it'll cost them, cost Labour ordinary members 40 quid, they might lose 4 million quid. Friends of mine say the gap in Labour's budget could be £8 million, just at a time when the Tories are coining it in with city money.
So when Miliband says this is a big risk, at least that bit is absolutely
That is
true.
definitely a risk,
true.
although they're also going to have a new process for electing the leader. Miliband was elected by the trade union bosses, and now it's going to be much harder.
Benedict.
Well, what's interesting, I think, is this, we really are, the election fever and the election campaign has definitely kicked off, I mean, actually at the beginning of January, because I really feel clearly Ed Miliband has been stung by the criticism and the image that has stuck, basically, about the one member, one vote not
Because
being
he was
the
elected
case.
by the union bosses. Yeah.
Precisely. I
Okay.
was there. We know the tenterhooks that we wore, and he got on. So he's trying to dispel that and get his ducks in a row. Will he?
No.
John Prescott feels strongly about it, and he is backing this. And as you referred to, Michael, he is
Great
saying
favourite of this
that it would
programme,
start
John Prescott. We love him.
that. Excellent.
Quite right too.
So he's saying he's actually saying that he's in favour of this, that he is backing it all the way, and that he started this process with
Very
John
good
Smith
headline there.
in 1993.
Leader
Leaders
put his head on the block. Get it?
Benedict, now,
Let's
I have
move
to
on
ask
to
you
an
about
interesting story.
A French story.
Surely not. No.
You're a notable television journalist who follows François Hollande. Most of the time, it's the other way around in France. We gather François Hollande is following other journalists around. But tell us about what you find in the paper today.
Well, there are two different angles. One is the blow, the double blow that David Cameron got on Friday, one at the Anglo-French summit, where the French president, apart from everybody noticing that he declined to answer about his personal life and about this alleged affair with the actor Julie Gaillet, more importantly for Mr. Cameron, he said that it was not a priority to renegotiate Britain's relationship.
Serious blow, that one.
It's a very serious blow, because what David Cameron needs is powerful allies. He needs Germany, he needs France. But the Foreign Office, interestingly in this article, is trying to put a positive spin on it, and is trying to say, well, look, you know, it's a process of negotiations, and it's not a definite no.
It's absolute rubbish.
That's not what I've heard in French.
Yeah, that's right. It's Foreign Office nonsense.
Do you think that at some level Hollande is taking revenge for some of the disobliging things that Cameron has been saying about the French economy over the last few months?
Like Grant Shapps said about driving the economy into the sand, and certainly it feels like, certainly the French press thinks that there's been quite a bit of French bashing. It's called French bashing in French. The fact that actually several ministers have come out and been very ridiculed Mr. Hollande because of his personal life. And also because of the bad unemployment figures. Let's remember that the candidate, President Hollande, campaigned about getting the unemployment figures, down, and he's not succeeded.
11%.
There's a very good, in Daily Telegraph, that's right, there's a very good column by my colleague Anne-Marie Moutet, and she talks about this and how he had a good visit in Turkey, but basically this ridicule, of course, he prepared his answer about Julie Gaillet, who, by the way, very interestingly on Friday, was nominated for the French equivalent of the César for the best supporting role.
We could make her head of Ofsted. The French, they know how to do it.
So, results on the 28th of February, but
very interesting, yes.
It will be interesting to see.
And you've got a great photograph, the photograph of the...
Hold it up. He doesn't take dignified photographs, does he?
Yes, and this has been singled out in the French press as being a very mean picture by the British press of President Hollande. We don't know if he's not very happy with the pot of shrimp he had in the pub, or the rain, or the ale. But interesting, Mr. Cameron actually looks quite relaxed.
Did you notice how Benedict said alleged affair just then?
Quite right.
She's a trained French journalist. It's only speculation.
Well, he hasn't confirmed it, but then he hasn't denied it.
No, it's true. It's true.
The other picture that I love here, and all London commuters will particularly enjoy, is good old Bob Crow having a...
He's preparing for Tuesday's strike.
Preparing for Tuesday's strike in Brazil.
I don't think this... I think this is not an advert for Brazil, but it is a photo of Bob Crow preparing, we understand, and in touch all the time with London to prepare 2 days of pain for Londoners, tube strikes because
he feels our pain.
Well, I don't know if he does feel our pain. He's been drinking champagne, he's been involved in karaoke, he's been there for 2 weeks, and he's got sunburn.
OK, very, very briefly, we can't finish without talking about the rugby. A great, great day for France.
Well, interestingly, it was called Le Crunch, but I think that's maybe what Mr. Cameron felt on Friday, since there was also the House of Lords vote. And the French were brilliant at the beginning, then the British were brilliant, and then...
English were brilliant.
Oh. The English, I beg your pardon.
It's a great moment for Scottish rugby fans like
you're
me.
Quite right.
England beaten, we haven't actually played yet.
But the Welsh, the Welsh are very strong, so that is the next big match.
Good luck. We're unionists. We want them both, Welsh and Scots, to win.
But the English could still win, not the Grand Slam, but the title, so there is still hope.
There's still hope for the English. That's a good note.
That's fair play, isn't it?
Very fair play
I hope
note
so.
from a French journalist to end on. Thank you both very much.